John, I'm planning on making this a weekly thing, but yeah, I think we're starting out with a bang here with an amazing guest with an amazing topic. I'm really excited. We're talking about chess playing LLMs. So LLMs obviously are, ChatGPT and all these similar related AIs that are getting so much attention. Um, and there has been a lot of attention recently on their ability to play chess. Like Google just ran um, a tournament that was like between different LLMs that was commentated by like Levi Rosman and Hikaru. So we're going to be talking about that. My guest is Jennifer Shahade. She's a 3 times national chess champion, Poker Stars Pro, hard at work on her next book, Thinking Sideways, How to Think Like a Chess Player and Win at Life. That's available for pre-order, so definitely check that out. So Jen, welcome.
Hey, thank you. I'm so excited about this topic. I think that it's really interesting when everybody talks about LLMs in chess. A lot of people approach it as like, why are they bad or can I beat it? Whereas what really attracts me is what it can tell us about our own minds. And
Mm,
as a writer, I love writing too. And I know you do too, Nate. Like you can
yeah.
really see the sweat and tears that go into each one of your posts. That's a compliment.
Okay.
I also love, like, and it's controversial among writers. I love just kind of like thinking about how they put together thoughts and
Mhm.
sentences, and we're going to get into a lot of that, but it really intrigues me quite a lot. And ultimately, I think it's all about becoming better thinkers ourselves by kind of seeing what they do well and badly. And I think we can do that
Yeah.
in this
Well,
half hour.
man, I feel like just in that intro, it's like I already have so many things I want to follow up on, like what you were saying about writing. Um, Obviously, there's a lot of AI writing out there now. It's so easy to access, and something I think that can like distinguish human, like a quality that AI writing has is it's very smooth, and that can be pleasing. But sometimes, like human writing being a little bit rougher appeals to me anyway. There's sort of gaps in it. There's little textures. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah,
Um,
it's that imperfection is
yeah.
like a face, and people have said this
Mm,
about music as well, that it's like knowing where to put those imperfections and in inconsistency
mm.
is so wonderful. And yes, I also think that one of the things you'll notice a few things in AI writing. Everybody likes to talk about the M dash, but I don't think that's a big one because you can always just delete it. And besides, everybody's using M dashes more now because they're awesome and
I know.
like of
I
all
have.
the things
I
that
feel so
AI.
nervous whenever I put in an M dash.
Yes.
That's I'm like they're gonna think it's. I really do it. I'm the one doing the M dash.
Yeah, I think it's more about, and this I think applies to chess as well. It's more about they really like patterns to make sense. So if you see an essay where the ending just seems beautifully wrapped up, like it wraps everything up perfectly in a bow, that is a bit of a telltale AI sign because most of us are horrible with closings. I don't know how to close.
Yeah. It's like plus it's like I'm
I'm
90% done.
so
Do I have to keep
bad.
writing? Like what the hell? Can I just post this? Yeah.
But we promised that we talk about LLMs and
Yeah.
chess
No. Absolutely.
and
So.
what you
Mhm.
can learn about chess from it, even though
Yeah.
they're not very good, which is kind of weird. Like, and but I think that this is so crucial. In fact, Ben Johnson, who is of course a friend of both of ours and of our Substacks, is recently had a podcast with, I believe his name is Ben Balas. He's also a Substacker and an academic. I think he's a PhD. And what I loved, one of the things he said, which is that he wishes more academic studies were done on mediocre players. I
Mm,
completely agree with that. And that's the thing I love about LLMs. The fact that they're mediocre makes it very interesting to me.
mm.
Because I mean, 3,500 stockfish play, sometimes it's not as easy to glean lessons from it.
Yeah. And by the way, if that's inspiring anyone watching this, the Lichess database is a fantastic resource. You can download for free more chess games than will fit on your computer between totally normal people playing on the internet. So that's really amazing. And then you can do also, it's very easy. That's like very easy data to wrangle. It's really fun to work with. Um, so you mentioned a few times that LLMs are relatively bad at chess. So I think that's a great starting point. So like for people who might not already be that familiar with this topic, um, they might be like, okay, what's the big deal? We've had computers that are amazing at chess for many years now. Um, So maybe you can talk a little bit about like what is it that's so especially interesting or weird about these LLMs that's attracting attention?
Well, I think what's interesting is they tend to play very well early in the game because they have access to a large number of PGNs and openings and opening books. And so they tend to play very well in the beginning, or at least they do now. I think the earlier models also often messed up in the very beginning most, but now they tend to play very well in the beginning and, basically theory. What's
Mhm,
interesting is that as the game continues, it's very difficult for them because they have to reconstruct the position from scratch. So it's really hard. Like when I'm playing the GPT-5 thinking mode, it's almost like you're playing blindfold chess. They're playing blindfold chess against you. They have to start from scratch. And so it's like 18 moves in, and even if they made a capture on a long diagonal, they might forget if they don't reconstruct. And that's why if you play an LLM and you try to play a really quick game with them, they're gonna just hallucinate and make horrible moves because they can't, figure out what's going on in those lines,
mhm.
especially the long lines.
That was the
And
oh, sorry, go ahead.
oh, yeah, so that to me is very, very interesting because there's studies on humans as well that when beginners start picking up chess, they also struggle with long moves on the ranks and the files and particularly the diagonals,
Yeah, the
and
like the,
part
the
of it is
sniper bishop.
Yes,
Yeah.
and part of it is visualizing, part of it is just that the move is further away, and if you're a new player or a little kid, like, literally it's further away from you
Yeah.
and your eyes, but
Mhm.
another part of it is that if you're visualizing, you might forget that something was there that's not there anymore, and the more squares that are between the piece and the destination, the more possibilities there are to F it up, and, like,
Yeah.
as chess masters, we don't think about this anymore, right? Like, it's
Yeah.
like it's
Yeah,
kind of
it
amazing, but
becomes
it's true.
second nature, but it's very much not. It's especially if you played thousands of chess games as a kid, you don't really remember that training, and that takes a long time to achieve as an adult.
Yeah. So I started to notice that, like, instinctively, I was always trying to play openings against the LLMs. Like the Queen takes D4 Sicilian was one that I played a lot.
Mhm.
And I realized that my instincts were guiding me towards positions with a lot of open lines and a lot of long lines because I knew they were going to make blunders. If you open up a line, they're going to make a blunder on that line. And so it's quite interesting to me. And I think we can also think about some of the philosophical implications of that beyond chess. For example, um, Ch- ChatGPT and OpenAI once said that sometimes these LLMs they really degrade if the conversation is too long. And that's partly it's just like a long line. They
Yeah.
can't necessarily connect what happened at the very beginning of the conversation with what's going on right now. And, I don't want this conversation to get too dark, but that has actually had some disastrous consequences in certain cases.
Mhm. Yeah, it's interesting what you said about long lines because I just played a game last night to just sort of, get a sense of how it is to play the latest version, and what you're describing is exactly what happened. It played really well for the first, like, 20 moves, and then on move 20, it played a move that ignored a threat I had, which is to make a pawn check or a pawn capture, really. It opened up a long file for my queen to come in, and it totally missed it. So, literally exactly what you were describing.
It's funny because
Yeah.
that's not a potential leak with a knight, right? A knight is the only piece that you're not gonna have that
Yeah,
issue
the
with.
knight has a fixed length. Um, one other thing I would just add about sort of what's so weird and interesting about this to me is that, you know, other, traditional chess engines like Stockfish have the rules of chess hard coded. And even the newer style neural network chess engines like AlphaZero and Mila Zero, even though they teach themselves the strategy of the chess by self play without human input, they do still have the rules hard coded. So part of like the weirdness and the creepiness of this LLM thing is LLMs do not have the rules of chess hard coded into them. They learn by reading text on the internet. So it's actually pretty wild that they can play chess at all. And I think it sort of speaks to, there's still a lot of like very active debate of like, are these things truly intelligent? Are they just glorified autocomplete? Like, what is really going on with this stuff? And I think their ability to play chess shows that like they're not necessarily intelligent, but they're not just autocomplete. Because to be able to play that many lethal moves in a row, they have to have like I think some kind of model of like the rules of chess and like a chess position because they can't just do it by memorization. There's too many possibilities. So like on some level, they do seem to be understanding chess. It's like it's a shaky understanding and it's a quirky understanding, but like there's something going on there.
Oh, definitely. They, uh, they certainly do, and by the way, I wanna continue to welcome everybody who's coming into this chat. I think, one interesting thing for me always is that what you really saw in that Kaggle composition was that a lot of them were converging on similar openings like a Sicilian. Another thing that probably they prompted them within the Kaggle competition, which when you and I play, I'm not sure we use these prompts, but it's not actually clear that they're playing to win. Like when you
Mhm.
ask an LLM to play chess with you, well, we assume as competitive players that it's like, oh, of course they're going to try to beat me, but not so fast, not necessarily. They just want to play a game. And
Yeah,
so,
and they
one of the articles you sent me was a great article. It mentioned that if when somebody played the bomb cloud against the LLM, and of course it played the double bomb cloud
yeah, and
because it's
for
about
for
like
people if for
matching the
people
pattern.
listening, the Bond Cloud is like sort of like a troll opening where you move your king forward very early. It's like it's
Yeah.
not a good chess strategy. It's like a joke or something you do to mess with your opponent.
And yes, they do, John. They do have access to chess PGMs that they've trained on. So that is
Mm.
part of it. And by the way, unlike literature or like more recent literature, that's not even really particularly controversial because that's all public domain. That has been something that various entities have tried to argue against. Famously, Bobby Fischer thought that the chess grandmasters should actually own the rights to their game scores, but it's never been challenged. And so for better and worse, chess players don't own their games.
Mhm.
Now they own the annotations to those games, but they don't own the games in any way.
Yeah,
So
there's been controversies about this when it comes to broadcasting tournaments and such.
yes. Yes, there has been controversies, and it's gone to the court several times, and, chess games as public domain has always ended up, winning out, which I mean, it's probably really good for chess, although, one could argue it's not good for professional chess players. I haven't really thought extensively about it.
Yeah, I
By
think
the
the
way,
cat's out of the
welcome
bag on that one. Yeah.
Benjamin Porto just entered the chat,
Hey,
so
Benji.
I feel like he's a great candidate for somebody who's thought about that critically, and I wonder what he thinks about it.
Um,
Yes, Evie Clark, thank you. LLM is large language model.
like ChatGPT, etc. Yeah. Um, yeah. So it seemed, in this tournament, um, some of the LLMs seem to perform a lot better than others. So that was sort of another interesting thing. I guess you sort of already mentioned what seems to be there might be a lot of causes for that, but probably the most obvious one is how many PGNs they were trained on. PGN stands for portable game notation. It's just the standard chess notation format. So I guess, when they train these models, they don't train them literally on the whole internet. There's some like architectural choices about like what do they actually feed in. And it appears that like some models, some developers and some companies chose to show them a lot of chess games and others did not. And like, probably the more chess games they've seen, the better they are. Um, you also mentioned them not necessarily trying to win. I think that it touches on that as well. Like, so they're stochastic. They're kind of imitating things. So they're not necessarily optimizing to win. They might be more imitating and like copying the games they've seen. So like the quality of the games would also matter. Like, do you feed them the Lichess database of the amateur games, or do you only feed them the grandmaster database of games played over the board live between master level players? That's going to make a difference too.
Yeah, and what's interesting about that is we just assume as chess players are going to play to win, and they're not good enough to meet you where we're at if you're a master or an expert player. But if you're a weak player, they can meet you where you're at. So if you start just playing horribly against an LLM, it's going to start playing bad back. And I love that because there's this poker player, Alex Keating. He's plays in the big game for Poker Stars, and he loves to play with amateur players and professionals. And one of the things he said, he's a great player, but takes tons and tons of risks. And one thing that he said in a post game interview was like, "I like to meet my player where they're at. I'll meet you where you're at." And I thought that, oh, that's a beautiful way to put it. So if it's an amateur who will actually kind of sandbag and play a little worse so that they can have a better time and maybe come back.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, that reminds me of how LLMs will play chess against someone.
And of course, this is a huge part of poker culture and being a poker pro is being good at the strategy is only half the game. getting invited to the right games can be a much bigger part. So, there's this whole thing around giving action, being fun to play with, not making people feel like they're exploited. Chess is more just like, mo- you know, people don't think about that so much in chess. They mostly show up and try to win. Um,
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that that's really a cool way to think about it, that it's not always about winning. It's actually with these AI companies, a lot of them, it's about keeping the user on the platform for as long as possible, right?
one thing that stood out to me right away when I started playing ChatGPT and chess is so it'll give sort of a running commentary on your moves, and it's tremendously sycophantic. Um, from the very first move, it was just gushing praise on my move. So I think that's part of it. Is like it seems the way they're trained. It seems like a lot of these large language models are very eager to please. With their comments and perhaps even with the moves they're playing.
Yes, I would agree with that, and there's been a lot made of that. In fact, they supposedly with 5 as opposed to 4, and they made it much, much less sycophantic, and it's still very sycophantic, but not nearly as much as it was before, which I think is really funny. And you can certainly train it to be a little bit less too. You can like tell it to stop flattering you as much, and it won't. But what I found very sad was that Sam Altman was interviewed after 5 came out, and he said that there were so many people who were, you know, contacting OpenAI and crying and being really sad because they felt like they lost their best friend. And I know like a lot of people would make fun of this and, mock the people who said this, but I think it's like really, I think it's really sad. And I actually feel a lot of sympathy because it just shows that people really need somebody to talk to and that they are not getting it in our modern society, and so they're relying on these. And I mean, it's good if it can fill a void temporarily, but it can't do it long term. So I think it should really be a signal to what we need to give people more of.
Yeah, I see. John Donaghy asked, "Is what distinguishes Chess.com's game review for an LLM? Must not be an LLM." I don't fully know what they have under the hood, but my impression has been that at least until recently, the Chess.com game review is not a neural network, which is what LLMs are, but is like a hard coded traditional programming thing. It sort of grew out of there's an app that you might have seen. I think it's called Dr. Wolf Chess. It was created by this really brilliant guy named David George. And that definitely started out as like a hard coded, traditionally programmed thing, just that just has rules. You can imagine that like you can explicitly write rules about like what constitutes a fork, what constitutes a pin, stuff like that. And it was just like all coded out like that, and that's how it worked. Obviously, it would be really appealing to move over to an AI neural network model that could be a lot more nuanced and a lot more subtle. Um, that turns out to be really difficult to actually pull off in a satisfying way. So I'm sure chess.com is thinking about that as like a very obvious idea. I'm not sure like how far they are into switching over to that. Um, okay, one thing there's interesting when you play. So we sort of talked about they tend to play well for a while, and then they sort of get stressed, and it gets harder and harder for them to remember, and they start messing up. What so then what starts to happen is they start to have this tendency. They may play illegal, they may blunder, they may play outright illegal moves, and this sort of gets to this tendency that LLMs have both in and out of chess. Which is sometimes they're called hallucinations. You could just say they're sometimes people say they're lying, but essentially to say things that are not true. And sometimes they're quite insistent on this, even though they're like if they play an illegal move. Actually, when I played last night, when I corrected its illegal moves, it would it has like a slow mode where it reviews the whole game, and it did actually acknowledge that it had played an illegal move. But what do you make of these hallucinations or lies or illegal moves? Like, does this tell us anything interesting?
Oh, definitely. I think it shows you what to look out for with AI. I think that is, and that's one of the things I love about this because we're experts in chess. We can look at what it does in chess and say, I need to be careful about this flaw when it tells me about life or tries to give advice to my friends. Like I should tell them to look out for this because basically, again, it wants to make things too perfect. So a lot of its hallucinations come down to I take its knight and it realizes that it can't take my knight back. And so it just makes up a night to take it with. And okay, I mean, at first people are like upset because they're like, oh, it's cheating. But it's not really cheating because, again, it wants to please the user. It's not interested in cheating against Jennifer Shahade. What's more happening is it's kind of confabulating something that makes sense because it doesn't have this data. And confabulation is something that happens to humans who sometimes have like lost, certain memories. And it is really kind of scary in a way because it shows that more important than being correct is to make a story that makes sense and that pleases the user. And so, of course, you should look out for that. Of course, I mean, if it gives you advice about something, yeah, sure, it's probably going to be like a combination of great Reddit threads in the last 10 years, along with some Wikipedia pages and all sorts of random stuff on the internet. And so, actually, the combination of that was sometimes going to be some good advice. Like, I'm not going to poo poo it and say that it's always going to be garbage. Sometimes people have had medical ailments and they've gone to ChatGPT and it's helped like clear the cobwebs. I wouldn't recommend that, but I'm saying like, you have heard stories of people where they're like, this has really helped me. Like I couldn't afford a lawyer and it gave me the right direction. Although, by the way, it doesn't have attorney-client privilege. So you got to be careful when asking it legal questions. But that said, a lot of people have had good experiences with it. But the negative is if it seems like too perfect, that's a real red flag because it always wants to make things perfect.
Yeah.
It's like some of us have friends like this, right? Where they're like, it's going to be okay. It's going to work out. It's going to match up. And of course, we know that's not true. Sometimes things don't work out. Sometimes there is no perfect solution. Sometimes
Yeah.
there's no night to recapture with.
um, absolutely. It's that's such a salient characteristics of how LLMs play chess and how they do everything. It's like they have such a strong attraction to like coherence. I was talking about sort of this very smooth quality of their writing. And when you uh when you play chess with them, that applies as well. And it's like all of their moves are like, if you're an experienced chess player, they're the moves you would expect. They're following a coherent story. And this is how humans generally play chess as well. We play according to a plan, like a conception of the game. Now, when you play against a chess engine like Stockfish, that's purpose built to play chess and is much better than any human, they don't really play like that. Like their moves can be jagged and unexpected. Like they don't necessarily follow a coherent story, at least that you as a human player can understand, but they are the best moves. So there's a thing of like humans and LLMs like to tell stories that are coherent. The reality of chess and the world is not necessarily that coherent. It can be like weird and jagged and disjointed. So I don't, yeah, I don't even think you can tie that up. It's just something that really stands out to me, like when I interact with LLMs or when I play chess with them.
Well, you're in good company by saying that because that was one of Gary Kasparov's points in deep thinking when he started doing more analysis with computers and comparing it to the analysis that was pre-computer in books. And he said even the greatest players, when they analyzed the game, it was always about making the story make sense. And then when you had more computer analysis, that fell apart. And a lot of these sweet stories where one player built up to a victory turned out to not be true. There was a defense, there was a counterattack, there was a way that they could have drawn or lost. And he put it very beautifully. I love that book, by the way. And shout out to Gary Kasparov, as apparently just a few hours ago he did clinch the victory in the match of the legends against Vishianan, which
Oh,
was just occurring over the last few days in St. Louis. A 30-year anniversary of the World Championship match in New York at the World Trade Center.
and of course, Gary Kasparov was the one who was defeated by Deep Blue actually many years ago now. So he's very interwoven into this story of chess and AI and computers.
Exactly, and that's why he was the right person to write that book, which, honestly was written many years ago. I think it's about 8 to 9 years old, I believe maybe 2018, something like that. But it really dated well. I reread it recently, and a lot of it just seems very pertinent today. By the way, we had a question from Dan Bach about putting in FENs into LEMs, and why that doesn't seem to work. Would you have better luck with PGNs? I think the answer is
Yeah.
yes, you would
Yeah, I
have
think
better
that
luck with
yeah, I think
PGNs.
Jen, you were mentioning this, like the way they seem to operate is like they play through the whole game from beginning to end to sort of refresh their memory. Again, for for people who aren't deep in the weeds of these formats, A PGN is portable game notation. That's the notation for a whole chess game. A fen is Forsyth Edwards notation. That's just a position. So probably they are going to do it better with the PGN the whole game. And there's a lot of if you're thinking about like trying to make like an app with an LLM or something, there's a lot of quirks and tricks of like how you feed in the information and how that changes the response. So it's like it can be very surprising and unintuitive, but it's like if you're trying to tinker with something to get LLMs to behave in a certain way, you have to like think very hard and experiment about like how exactly you're prompting them.
And I'm glad that Dan actually mentioned FENs because as Substackers, I think it's important to point out that sometimes, I am trying to rush and post an article and I put like all my diagrams in and they look pretty. And, take the time to put that alt text with the FEN because that makes it accessible to a broader number of users. There are occasions where, they won't be able to access that. Now, I know you usually link to Lichess, so
Mhm.
that's another way to get that FEN code, but that's a way that visually impaired users can still enjoy the articles.
That's a great point. Yeah. Um, so I realize we're at the end of the time. Can we do one more question?
Yeah, let's do.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm happy to do a couple more questions
Yeah.
because I think we started a little late.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yes, let's take a couple questions and then wrap it up. But yeah, this was super fun, by the way,
Mhm.
Nate. So
Absolutely.
thanks
No,
for
I
instigating
was
this.
very scared this would not work at all technically. So I'm happy it worked. I'm happy people showed up. I think it's been super interesting. So I'm very pleased. But yeah, so what the one more so let me do one more question and then we'll do some more audience. Um, so I mean, there's been some really dire predictions about AI and LLMs. Some people saying expecting them to hit this period of sort of runaway growth in capability and intelligence where like they're able to leverage their own intelligence to improve it in an exponential way or something like this. People are saying that they'll take over the world, destroy humanity. Um, can this chess stuff tell us anything about either those risks or maybe some limitations that why they won't be able to do this? Like, does chess have anything to say about whether this like cataclysmic scenario might actually happen or not?
Well, I just think that chess is a sign that sometimes your predictions aren't going to be correct. A lot of people thought in 1997 when Deep Blue beat Gary Kasparov that chess was going to die because why play chess when you could play Go, which hasn't been solved yet. But the exact opposite. Every decade, chess became more and more popular. And as we found in chess, those people that over relied on AI couldn't become as good players because they weren't able to think for themselves. It's the people who are able to combine using computers and AI in beautiful harmony with actually using their own brains. And, I've done commentary before with, one of the greats, Grandmaster Peter Svidler, many people's favorite commentator. And one story really struck me is that Peter, who's obviously trained extensively with computers, like, no, of course, but across the room, and it was so far across the room, Nate. I'm telling you, it was like the other side of the room. He has wicked eyesight. And he was like, "Oh, I see some engine analysis over there. I need to cover it with Post-its." He literally took some
Because he
Post-its
didn't
out and
want
covered
his own thought process to be corrupted.
Yes, because he thought that somehow the corner of his eye, he would be tempted to look at it because it's like godlike answers and it would corrupt his thought process.
Yeah.
And
But
so,
this is for everyone who wants to improve their own chess, this is an important tip is like be careful about turning on that engine because once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. And the answers seem obvious. But as we know, when you're playing a chess game without assistance, very little is obvious. It's a hard game.
yeah, and even the bar. A lot of people try to combine it, like where they'll put the eval bar, but they won't put the engine on. But even that, I feel like it badly corrupts your thought process. You can't really think on your own anymore because you're thinking about, can I make the bar go up? Can I make it go down? It's just like we need to remember from the example of chess that thinking for ourselves is so crucial and that we need to maybe create systems that seem counterintuitive, like running across the room and covering a computer with Post-its to make sure that we are maximizing our own potential.
Okay, absolutely. Let's see. So yeah, maybe I think we've got time perhaps for a few audience questions. If anyone has something on their mind that they haven't been able to address yet, you could type it in the chat.
And shout out to all the great Substackers in the chat. I mentioned Benjamin Porteau. I see Junta Ikeda. I don't know if I pronounced that right. I read your work all the time, but is it Junta or Junta? Welcome. I saw a post you recently posted about Japanese, which was fascinating. Hello, Jeffrey. Welcome.
Yeah,
And
there are a lot of great. There's so many great chess substackers now, and I would love to see it grow and see everyone get more attention. So that's actually part of what I'm thinking with these live streams. I'm gonna be doing these weekly with a different guest each time. So hopefully we'll get a lot more discussion going amongst this sort of burgeoning chess community on Substack.
yeah, we had a couple questions if you scroll up, and I agree because it's understandable why chess still lives basically on Twitter. I get it because it's an international game and everybody was there originally, but the algorithm and the effects of it, I think, are getting like it's tough sometimes for that to be the only place where chess lives. And then some of the prominent people who used to be there are now gone because they left, and I get it. Like some of my favorites, like Ben or Yosha. But you really feel that void, like the people that used to be there aren't there anymore. You're barely there,
Yeah,
right?
I quit. It was just too brutal. I couldn't take it. I don't know.
Yeah, and so building a bit stronger chess community in Substack is just awesome, and so, like, I, um, love everybody who tries to make that a part of what we do here. Benjamin, good night. He's in Batumi. Awesome. Good luck over there, Benjamin. Keep posting photos, at least to our chat group, if not more broadly. By the way, Jacob Lanoff did have one question. Can you play chess without cheating? And it responded, yes, I can play without cheating. But in what sense is the game fair since it's a supercomputer playing against a mediocre human? Jacob, actually, as we mentioned earlier in this, but maybe we didn't emphasize it enough, it actually doesn't play that well. I don't know what your level is, Jacob, but you would probably beat it, especially if you consider it like the rules that are normally played in blindfold chess, where if your opponent makes an illegal move, that you win. Because I think I couldn't really give it a rating now because it's so all over the map. It plays part of the game like an 1800 and then part of it like a 200. So if you just kind of wait around for those 200 moves, you're going to
Yeah,
win.
if you survive, it's probably going to collapse.
Yeah. So yeah, but some of those tips will make you beat it more easily. Now, future editions, all bets are off, and I'm sure if they really wanted to make it very good in chess, in the same way that it was able to improve its math skills substantially, they could just flip a switch and make that happen with like a Stockfish plugin of some sort. But I don't. I hope that doesn't happen because we have plenty of super computer chess programs, and it's really interesting to kind of follow the natural progression of this one.
Yeah, and that way it could even be sort of a more satisfying sparring partner for like an intermediate player because that's something that's traditionally been kind of difficult for chess engines is like they play really well and then it used to be difficult to make them play poorly in a way that felt satisfying and human like. But the way LLMs plays feels very human like. It's like they play sort of logical moves. They ma- when they make blunders, the blunders make sense. You can sort of see what they were going for, even though it doesn't work. So they're kind of fun to play against.
It's kind of playing like a human, a mediocre human who's playing blindfold right now.
Mhm.
So, like, when they make a mistake, a lot of times it's because they like one time it played queen takes h2 checkmate on me, but I wasn't castled yet, so I just took their queen.
Yeah,
Stuff like that where it's like they're hallucinating, they're getting the order of the moves right because they're blindfold. It would be playing like a 1600 who's playing blindfold. I'm sorry, some 1600s probably play better blindfold than
yeah.
others. I mean, blindfold is a skill that is very individual. Eric says, "How do you feel that AI will obtain the ability to be a good coach for beginner players?" Excellent question. I mean, I'm a big humanist, so I wouldn't be thrilled about it on some level, but I would hope that it would just make somebody crave human contact more. I mean, that's what I want. I feel like when people are very lonely and they talk to ChatGPT and they can kind of realize how lonely they are and seek that out more in their real lives. Like that's what we want. We don't want it to be like, oh, I'm lonely, so I'm just going to talk to ChatGPT about my problems forever. The idea is like, oh, I'm so lonely, and they're kind of giving me this intellectual comfort and emotional comfort, maybe I can reconnect with somebody who reminds me of this. And the same if like ChatGPT is giving you an amazing chess study plan, maybe you can form your study group and talk about those ideas. And so, yeah, I have to be an optimist. I know there are a lot of doomsdayers out there, but that's my take. Nate?
Yeah, yeah. So, I actually kind of explored this a little bit. at some point I was interested in the possibility of building an app myself. I kind of backburnered that, but I did some interviews, with people who are like really in the weeds of like working on AI, like who really know a lot about it on a technical level. And the consensus amongst those people seemed to be that if you're going to do, try to make an AI chess coach, it doesn't really make sense to try to do it with an LLM end to end because they still don't understand chess very well. That's not what they're built for. Um, so what most people I talked to told me was what would make more sense is you still have a chess engine like Stockfish, and then you use the LLM as a communication layer because they have different strengths and weaknesses. Stockfish is incredibly good at chess, but it can't really explain itself. Um, Now, if you're an expert level player and you know how to use it, you can kind of work with it to like extract those insights. But like for beginner to intermediate level player, it's very difficult. Um, Whereas the LLM, it understands enough chess to play like sort of reasonable legal moves for the most part. But when you press on it, it's like quite a vague understanding, and it'll sort of, at some point kind of lapse into like very generic drivel. So ideally, you would extract the chess information from the chess engine, and you'd use the LLM to explain it in a way a human can understand it. The specifics of actually implementing that are not easy. There's a lot of several services online that claim to do it. I haven't seen anything yet that I think is really good, but people are working on this. It might get better over the next few. I mean, obviously everything about AI is changing at a breakneck speed. So who knows?
I think you're absolutely right, and I think people are working on it, and the stuff I've seen has been somewhat interesting. I mean, one of them I saw, like, they automatically, grabbed some of my Elite Chess games and gave, like, some kind of, like, human analysis of them, but, as a humanist who's obsessed with these things nonetheless, I can't help but have like a knee-jerk negative response when I feel like something seems to be like, potentially replacing human labor. So I wouldn't say negative because I'm here and I've written multiple articles about chess and LLMs. I would say ambivalent. I'm
Yeah.
deeply ambivalent about it. Like really try to like make it into something positive for humans. And I think that's there, but I always want to keep my eye on people because like the biggest danger, not the biggest danger, there's very many dangers, but one of the dangers of AI is that it can create like kind of a techno-feudalism where people who have access to the most powerful models just capture all the money and the power. And so clearly, regular people have to kind of like be on the eye and the lookout for that.
Yeah, for sure. Um, well, I don't know. Is that too depressing of a note to end on, or
Oh,
maybe a little?
I was trying to put it in a positive
Yeah,
way.
let's do the positive thing. Like, let's keep it human.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think okay. Well, we've gone a little bit over time. So, Jen, thank you so much for staying and sharing your insights. So, yeah,
What's a
yeah,
positive way to
yeah,
put it? Like, what's a positive note to end on? I mean, we can mention just oh, I did want to ask you, Nate. So I
mm,
talked in my recent post about how humans can sometimes be bad at visualizing because we do so many problems on like chess.com, lead chess, whatever, chess tempo, even chess books sometimes, but that's another thing. But that we're good at recognizing patterns, but some of us have become worse at visualizing because
mhm,
those tactics train your pattern recognition more than your visualization. And I saw the samely in LLMs because they wouldn't be able to keep the updated board in their head.
mhm.
So, as a very prolific coach and a successful one, what is your top tip to fighting back against that and improving our visualization?
Yeah, yeah. So, just to kind of restate the question, I think what you're saying is I would draw a distinction between pattern recognition and calculation. Pattern
Yes.
recognition is like typical patterns on a chessboard, forks, pins, these patterns that recur. And you can train those by doing a large volume of easy puzzles. And that's essential to do. Um, then calculation is how you structure your thoughts. And there's a process there because when you start out in chess, it doesn't really make sense to work on calculation very much because until you've built that base of pattern recognition, um, your thoughts make no sense anyway. So there's nothing to structure. You can't do it. Um, so what I find typically works is when you're starting out, you got to grind a bunch of easy tactics to instill that pattern recognition in your mind because you need that to be a good chess player. Now, if you go far along enough along that road and you become a good enough chess player, let's say around like 1600, 1700 level, now things start to change. Your opponents also have that same pattern recognition ability. And then that's where calculation comes into play, where you have to be able to see a few, farther into the future, farther ahead, more intricate combinations that are maybe combining a lot of patterns. So that's when you have to start working calculation. And that's when you go from a large volume of easy problems to mixing in, at least sometimes, a smaller volume of much harder problems that take longer to do and really stress your abilities and push you to the limits of what you can see and what you can do. Does that make sense?
I completely agree with you, but I also feel like specifically, I'm making a slightly more specific point that, like, suppose it's an empty board and we're just visualizing the pawn going forward. Partly, there's not that many options, so that's one reason why it's easier. But I also noticed that with some people, especially children, what often happens is that they forget that there was a bishop on c4, and then they forget that that line has been open, even if it's just one or two
Yeah,
moves later
like
down
looking
the
at them
line.
pieces. When
Yes.
you get several moves in the variation and pieces have been captured, they're gone, or perhaps they're on different squares. But if you're looking at the board, your brain is telling you there's a piece there, even though the position 3 moves ahead, which is what you're trying to analyze, it's not there anymore. Um, yeah, so in terms of that, I would say whenever possible, analyze without moving the pieces to train that. If you talk about the Indian school of chess, which is of course Gukesh, and world champion, and many, many other tremendously um, successful players like, Ramesh, this legendary coach. The way I've heard he runs training sessions is they put a position on the board, and they don't move the pieces, and they just analyze and analyze and analyze. And the really strong players, the grandmasters, participate in the analysis. The players who aren't quite there yet watch and listen, and they try to follow. But they're all training their ability to visualize. Um, so this is really important. You can also do blindfold exercises, um, you know, where you try to, like, for example, take a chess book and read through the whole game and visualize all the variations without a board. That's pretty hard. You have to be pretty good to do that. I mean, and it's also very strenuous, but that's another way you can try to train that. I tend to think I'm not so sure about these like specialized blindfold exercises. They might work, but I also feel like if you just analyze properly without moving the pieces, you kind of get the visualization for free. So I don't know that you need to do anything outside of that if like you have good analysis habits.
Yeah, I agree. There's different ways to roam, and some people might struggle with it more than others. There is on the steps books, they have some nice visualization exercises, which I think are pretty useful for newer players.
Mm.
But Dan Bach, just to close things out, shout out to all our Substackers in the chat. Give them a follow. Let's build chess on Substack. And yeah, he points out that Sam Asaka had a great Substack post recently about pattern recognition versus calculating. I don't know if I saw that one, Dan, so thanks for pointing it out. I'm gonna give it a read and a like, and I hope that you all have an amazing weekend. Thanks for inviting me, Nate, and for
Oh,
being
thank
like
you so much.
a
It was so fun. Yeah, and so everyone, if you're not subscribed to Jen's Substack, like, what are you even doing? But you can subscribe right now. Subscribe to me, and I am planning on making this a regular thing, like this chess conversation Friday. Next week, I'm going to be talking with Dalton Perrine, another awesome chess Substacker. We're going to be talking about guess the move training, um, which he believes, and I agree, is like a really underrated way to get better at chess. So yeah, that's going to be next Friday if all goes to plan.
yeah, wonderful. Thank you, John. Thank you, everybody, for joining. This has been amazing,
All
and
right.
thanks for being an early adopter on Substack and for bringing it forward, Nate. Have a great weekend yourself.
Yeah.
Bye,
Have a great
everyone.
weekend, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. See ya.